In a world that needs new math teachers, a select group has shown up and decided to teach us exactly what we need in these new math teachers. We will be interviewing them today, but first, let's start with their introductions. It's the Calculus Crusader. Need help deriving functions? That's not a problem for him. The Calculus Crusader can derive any function given to him. Need the integral too? That won't be a problem for our lovable Calculus Crusader. It's the imaginary number twins. With their powers of invisibility, they can get any math problem done with any amount of time, anywhere. It's Super Statman.
You think those cards can beat me? I'm Super Statman. I can change the probability in the cards. Read 'em and weep.
Today he will be interviewed by our guest interviewer, Jimmy the Fallon. He will ask several questions regarding EL students' lives at the local school districts.
So teachers in our content area, which is mathematics, are responsible for planning and incorporating language instruction, as well as supports, modifications, and accommodations that are needed in order to allow EL students to access course standards. Part of that entails meeting with ESL teachers, specialists, to collaborate in making sure that the content is made accessible for EL students, as well as meeting to monitor the progress of EL students in our content classes. Additionally, the district, and therefore us, the content area teacher, must utilize the same grade systems for EL students as they do for all students. They are not graded on a separate system. Another key part, and it's a key part, of serving EL students as a teacher is getting to know the students and learning about their cultural backgrounds. This is true for all teachers, not just math teachers. Knowing some of the background of why the student may have moved to the US or what in their life has impacted their learning of language or of mathematics can be very helpful in discovering how to best approach teaching the student. Additionally, as Mrs. Latavik from Penn Manor High School shared with me, a big issue for EL students in the math classroom is that math is often taught very differently in the US than it is in other countries. So, knowing where the student came from and how that country taught math is necessary for a smooth transition into our math classrooms here. Along with this, simply translating content is not effective, as the content material is new to the student, even in their own language, let alone English. In sum, collaboration with ESL specialists to create accommodations and modifications for the students, as well as getting to know the students' background and cultures, makes up the role of a mathematics content teacher in teaching EL students.
So the EL students actually have a decent amount of support, right? There's roughly, I would say, 135 EL students at the middle school, but then in the district, you're looking at more like 1,700. So that is just crazy, especially when you compare it to the surrounding districts. You don't see as many EL students. So we're looking at this district, and you got a lot more necessity for that resource, right? So when it comes to the teachers that we have, well, there are 4 designated teachers for the building and roughly 70 in the whole district. So we're trying our best to kind of help these students in any way that we can. In terms of the languages that are supported, we have, Spanish, but with Spanish, there's different dialects like Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic. With Afghanistan, we have Pashto and Persian. Africa, you got Tanzania, Uganda. You have all these different dialects, all these different cultures, all making, the school district very diverse. And thanks to that, we need all the help we can get. And one of the big things that we can do as teachers is kind of collaborate with our EL teachers that are specialized in this. One big tool that we can definitely use at our disposal is the idea, it's called the language line, I believe is the program. And basically it acts as the middleman for when we're trying to communicate with parents. Communicating with parents is a big thing when it comes to working with EL students, and Language Line allows for you to call these parents and have a translator over the phone with you. This has proved to be leagues helpful when actually, not only contributing to the students' learning, but as well as the teacher's interaction with the parents. So if we use tools like that at our disposal, we'll make the lives of these EL students a lot easier.
I can tell you a few things. First, there are approximately 230 EL students in Penn Manor School District and about 83 students in the high school. If you're counting students who have graduated from the EL program but are still being monitored, then that number jumps up to 275 within the whole district and 108 within the high school. The top 5 languages that are represented other than English in Penn Manor High School include Spanish, Nepali, Swahili, Arabic, and Amharic. Mrs. Latavik told me when I interviewed her that she was the only ESL specialist at Penn Manor High School, at least the only full-time employee. And there are only 5 full-time employees in the entire district working in the EL program. Now, for an EL learner in Penn Manor, the program generally works like this. Whenever you register for Penn Manor, you take a home language survey. If you list that you speak a second language, then you are further tested and asked follow-up questions in order to determine if you should be placed in the EL program. Then, according to the WIDA test levels, then if you are a level 1 or 2, you are put into a self-contained learning environment. If you're a level 3, you are started in self-contained and then eventually moved into a pushed-in environment. And if you're level 4 or 5, you start classes in the general education content classrooms. In order to help the teachers teach the EL students effectively, the ESL specialist at Penn Manor sends out emails with strategies for level 1 and level 2 students. And in addition, there's a shared Google Drive that lists the EL students' profiles and it lists strategies and tools to use with these students. Then, to graduate the EL program, students must test above a 4.6 on the access test. If they do that, and they pass the rubric that must be filled out by their English teacher, then they are able to graduate the program. These students are then monitored for the next 4 years, each marking period, to see if their grades remain above 70%. If a grade drops below 70%, then they are checked to see if it is a language issue that is causing the struggling grade. Finally, in order to help prepare teachers for EL students, they do Professional Learning Day and different in-service day programs in order to help teach the teachers how to teach their students.
Oh my gosh, I would love to. Math is such a fun thing to get into, and I feel like one of the biggest things that we can actually use are the use of visual aids, right? There's a lot of manipulatives that we can use, whether they be number tiles, or you're thinking like cards, dice, right? All of these things can be used to help students understand the material. And these are visuals, right? Typical stuff that will transcend that language barrier that is typically there. So using stuff like that can help us understand, the area, understand quadratics, or just teach general geometry. It's a nice bond between, the learning and the students. Another thing that was brought up, and was actually brought up by our teacher, our professor, is the idea of scaffolding, right? There are many methods and a lot of things in mathematics that can be somewhat complex. So finding some way to break these down, whether it being like a think, pair, share method, or just anything, that scaffolding, it's not only going to help, your general student, but it is going to be an even bigger help to an EL student, right? If we simplify that language, if we find other ways to say things that we can, make it easier and, less complex for the students, that scaffolding is going to do wonders for the students' learning. I'd say the final thing, just off the top of my head here, would probably be the inclusion of real-world problems. Making those personal connections with the students and their culture is going to do leagues for actually contributing to their learning. It creates a more comfortable environment just that will allow for these students to really feel at home in the scary world that can be mathematics. So I think if you include those real world examples, the visuals, the manipulatives, the scaffolding, you're going to find that as a math teacher, you're going to benefit and help the students that are those EL students so much. So I think using those tools that are disposable, you're going to be a real superhero.
Sure, I can talk about that for a bit. So, whenever I was at Penn Manor, we had a couple of students in our pre-algebra class who were part of the EL program. They were both listed as WIDA level 3 students. But in my experience talking to them, I would have thought they would have been level 4 or level 5. They were very fluent in English, and the only time that we had any issues with them not knowing a word or having to slow down a bit was words and definitions in math content. It was stuff that like native English speakers struggled with as well. We slowed down for the entire class. So I was surprised to see that they were EL learners, and I felt as though in the class they had high A's, and the class material generally bored these students. And so I was thinking that perhaps they were placed in this class because they were EL students, and one student in particular was new to the school. And I'm thinking that with a better pre-testing environment and getting to know the students, just hearing what one of the students went through in their life to get to this point at Penn Manor, I was like, these students should be probably in the college prep level class rather than in the career prep level class. And so I think that there's a bit of a bias against these EL students when it comes to their class placements.
We need to be the next math teachers of the world, ones that can support all students, including and especially EL students. This is our goal as the super math teachers of Millersville University.